The mathematical principles of natural philosophy. This is physics. Some people believe that humans would not be able to reach a real truth of the universe that is able to explain every single phenomena that is happening in the world correctly as it actually is. And that is because they believe that humans' understanding will always have a limit. For example, we cannot understand the concept of two-dimensional space intuitively. We cannot imagine a space that has length, width, and without a height or a thickness to it, because in our three-dimensional brain, an object can only exist when it has a height or thickness to it. We are able to use some cognitive shortcuts, such as thinking about the concept of above water and below water. Then the surface of water is a concept that has no thickness to it, but we can only approach this question through thinking about this question in a three-dimensional mindset. This, in fact, shows that we cannot directly and intuitively understand two dimensions, and that we have to understand the concept of no height with the concept of height. Not to mention that higher dimensions cannot even be understood with cognitive shortcuts. However, fortunately, we have a very useful tool called mathematics, and this can help us to understand concepts that are beyond the human intuitive understanding, such as higher and lower dimensions. Many abstract concepts that cannot be understood by intuitions can be explained and derived by mathematics. However, when you think about it, isn't mathematics just one form of condensed human logic that started from intuitions, such as the 5 postulates proposed by Euclid? If we already know that the human logic is limited and that math is derived from the human's natural intuition, then isn't math destined to be limited as well? I like to think of this problem this way. Math starts off by using things that we know is true to conclude patterns and general structures of reasons. Then from these structures, we are able to derive using known truth, new conclusions, and so on. The development of mathematics is able to conclude many theorems and formulas that we know is true. Using these tools that we know is correct, we are able to derive further with it, eventually beyond the limit that human intuition can interpret. Now, I quote Richard Feynman. The mathematicians are only dealing with the structure of the reasoning, and they do not really care about what they're talking about. They do not even need to know what they are talking about, or as they themselves say, or whether they say is true. Now let's go back to the logic chain of the people who believe that human cannot reach a real truth. So this is how it goes. Because all theories and logic comes from humans' consciousness, and humans' consciousness has limitations. Therefore, all theories and logic that human came up with has limitation. And because limited and logics and theories cannot reach a real truth, therefore, human being cannot reach a real truth. First of all, there's an obvious logical error in that logic chain. First of all, to convince us, they must prove that their point is a real truth, and that this truth shows that their point is correct. Now, we can ask them a question. Is stating that logic cannot reach a real truth a real truth? If it is, then this statement saying that human beings cannot reach a real truth through logic is derived by logic itself. To make that logic chain correct, they can only say that human beings cannot reach a real truth is not a real truth because it is derived by logic. But if it isn't a real truth, then why should we believe it? So there's a few assumptions being made in this logic chain. We can look at them in further detail. So assumption number 1, because human consciousness has limitations, therefore all theories and logic that human comes up with have limitations. So the questions that now that we should be asking is, just because human consciousness has limitations, does that mean that the theories and logic that human creates have limitations as well? Assumption number 2, limited logics and theories cannot reach a real truth. Just because the logic and theories are limited, does this mean that we cannot reach a real truth? So if the theories that humans create has no limitations, does that necessarily mean that we can reach a final truth? This brings up an interesting thing to discuss as well as a philosophical thing, but can a real truth be logically wrong? So this is because many things that are logically correct aren't really correct in real life.